And we also have some members and officials online. So we've got Mayor Ash from Matamatapiako, we've got Mike Montgomery from Waipā District, got Sarah Stevenson from Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, and well, okay, Councillor Lou from Hamilton City. I hope I haven't missed anyone. Please shout out if I have. Okay. So for those members online, in terms of any questions or comments you want to make, please just raise your hand in terms of the teams, and I can make sure I then provide the opportunity for you to make comment or ask questions as we work through both the workshop and formal meeting. I'm going to save a number of comments I was going to make for the formal meeting, but certainly really warm welcome, congratulations to those who are around the table. And I think, as Mayor Axel said, he had been a former member back in the day, and Liz had been around the table in the previous triennium, as had Angela in terms of the PT subcommittee. So I think without further ado, I'll ask Robert to start off in terms of the presentation. You've been circulated with that. I will pause 2 or 3 times during the presentations at the end of a particular tranche of slides and provide the opportunity for members to ask any questions that they may have in terms of what's been presented. And obviously at the end, there'll be a roundup Q&A opportunity. And you haven't been circulated with it yet because it's virtually hot off the press. But we have Vanessa here from Department of Internal Affairs, and she's going to make a presentation and make comments in terms of the reforms that are currently underway in respect of the sector. So we will do that at the end of this induction presentation. Robert. Oh, Nanaya. We've just done introductions, so if you'd just like to introduce yourself and who you represent, that would be great.
Member on the Ngākau and part of kaupapa. It leads the excellent discussions that we have. O tira, tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou. Turi noa kia koe, Maria, au mai hara mai, whakatau mai, hoki mai. I roto tēnei kaupapa o tāte. Nō reira, tēnei te mihi. Kia mai tātou.
Yeah, pure, Nanaya. Robert.
Right. So I'm not going to conduct death by PowerPoint here. So I'm going to whip through these slides a little bit, put Lyndall to the test in terms of which ones I choose to talk to. The purpose of today's session is to give you an opportunity for a deeper dive into the future-proof projects and work program than I was able to provide in the induction sessions for each individual council. And it's to give you a sense of the kind of work that we will be doing over the next 12 months and the kind of recommendations that we'll be seeking from you to pass on to the membership organisations. So the way the workshop's going to work is you're not going to hear a lot from me. What we'll be doing is the subject matter experts from your organisations who lead the work of Future-Proof will come and talk to their areas of expertise. And so you'll get a chance to meet some of the people that are doing the groundwork, if you like, in building up all of the stuff that Future-Proof does. Next slide I'm going to talk to, Lyndall, I think is very quickly the who is part of Future-Proof. So we've got that list of who is part of Future-Proof on the screen there, which again I've talked about in the induction cycle. We're going to provide an opportunity today for our central government partners really to talk about their role in Future-Proof and the value they see from being part of Future-Proof. And for that reason, I'm going to stop talking now and throw to our government agency partners. And I think the first slide is that partnership approach slide. Was that one you guys were going to speak to?
Vanessa.
You got it too. Kia ora. Vanessa Blakelock, in case you knew, so Department of Internal Affairs. I'm sorry I opened speaking in an acronym before, that's one way to turn people off. So just to say it's a privilege to be one of the partner agencies. I've met many of you before, but congratulations again on behalf of all of the Crown agencies on your appointments. We don't want this to be death by PowerPoint, but we thought it would be useful for you not only to meet you, for those of you who haven't met us all in the round, but also just to have a quick explanation of somewhat of our role in relation to the partnership and how we see the benefit, and continue that discussion with you over the coming months. And the first thing to say is when Andrew comes to his part in this, where he will be speaking after me to his slide, he will explain why it is that he has a seat at the table, and the rest of us are very much here, but in a support role. So if we could flip to the next, please. So this is really just to give you an idea. From all of the agencies that you'll be briefly hearing from, is that we see this as a I guess a vehicle to engage with you and the councils in the context of growth, but also of a way of working together, of making connections with you all, and that because we are either based in the Waikato or, like in my case, in Auckland, not in Wellington, that we are consistent attendees and people for you to have connections with. So that is certainly very important to all of us. And by doing that, I guess we get some understanding, some of us have deep understanding of the growth needs of the constituent councils in the partnership. And that is certainly very much helped by the knowledge that Robert and Bill share with us. And yeah, part of that is, I guess, by being here, not always in person, but when we can, but working with you inside these meetings and obviously outside. It's really about building that constructive partnership within the context of Future-Proof. And lastly, this point about advocacy for the sub-region with our own agencies and with other agency colleagues, it's subtle, but it's really important. And as you might understand, in the central government context, we're often asked for information in a very rapid fashion, or just an off-the-cuff kind of impression about things that are going on within Future-Proof, and to be able to, even if we don't immediately have that at our fingertips, but knowing who to contact, where to get a sounding board for that, it just can't be underestimated how often that happens, and how useful we find that. And I certainly hope that you will find that too. But I will pass to Andrew, who's on the next slide, and then after that, it will be Sarah.
Yeah, and if members can just hold any questions until we've heard from all of the government agencies, then we'll pause for any questions at that point. Andrew.
Sure. I'm glad you got our photos up on these, Vanessa. So good now. So that's me a year ago, Axel. Already pointed out my grey hairs, and Axel knew me 10 years ago as an officer at Waikato District Council, so I'm sure we both look significantly different. And just on that, I've worked at 4 of the partner councils over my career, and I always get a bit of imposter syndrome sitting around this table now, given the officer roles that I had reporting to the councillors over those times. The seat at the table for NZTA Waka Kotahi, I mean, part of the terms of reference for future-proof, but I guess it underlies the critical importance of transport to the future-proof area, not exclusively the state highway network, but also the local road development and connectivity too, and we'll hear a bit about that today from others. I've been undertaking so I'm Director of Regional Relationships for those that haven't met me, been in the role for a year, and I'm effectively the front door to issues within NZTA at an elected member, CE level, local authorities in Waikato, but also Bay of Plenty. Been getting around over the last couple of months and into the new year doing individual inductions at councils with your new elected member groups. I don't think I've visited anyone's council yet that's a part of this growth area, but I think there's some that have booked, and thank you, Eugene, for Monday conversation in the new year. And what that is telling me at the moment is some really useful trends across, an operational but also strategic level that we need to be aware of as well. So in terms of NZTA itself, we have Transport Minister, Chris Bishop. We have a board chair is Simon Bridges. We have a CEO called Brett Glidden, who's been in the role a year. I think we both started in our roles on the same day. Only worked within the transport agency from the days. So we've got a fairly solid team governing and behind us there. The Minister himself has had a keen interest in future past and has engaged in meetings with the mayors more recently. And I'll talk a little bit about Southern Links shortly as a road of national significance too, and he's had particular interest in that route and finding out more about that as he's entered this portfolio. Do a little bit of 101 on how we operate. It's not too much. I've caused a lot of deaths through PowerPoint in the last probably days in this room. We have a government policy statement for transport that becomes our Bible. Currently, economic productivity is the key focus of that government policy statement. It sets our directions for 3 years. The next GPS will be drafted over the course of 2026 by the Ministry of Transport, signed off eventually by the Minister as a final on the 1st of July 2027 to align with our new National Land Transport Program period. The GPS sets the pots of funding, which are called activity classes, and that directs whether the funding in the National Land Transport Fund is spent over that 3-year period, looking with a 10-year horizon, just like an LTP does at a council. So currently under the GPS settings we have, the bulk of the funding in the NLTF is directed towards state highway maintenance, as well as maintenance of local roads and what is referred to as pothole fund, as well as the roads of national significance, which, as you can imagine, as the million and billion-dollar highways chews up a lot of the funding that we do have available. So it has resulted in smaller activity class pots in some other areas. The NLTP itself, that becomes our national program of works, giving effect to the GPS and directing where and what activities that National Transport Fund is to be distributed to. Get a project into the NLTP needs to come through the regional land transport plans, which are the primary role of the Regional Transport Committee, and is of our Regional Transport Committee around the table today. We had our first meeting on Monday when I went through this in a bit more detail at a more operational level. We also, as a road controlling authority ourselves with 11,000 kilometres of state highway network, feed into the RLTP and the NLTP with the improvements that we require in our state highway network. Some of those might be dear to councils, like a Whatawhata roundabout, for example. Those are called the State Highway Improvement Program, or the SHIP. We love our acronyms. And the SHIP, alongside the RLTP, NLTP, effectively directs where those funds in the National Land Transport Fund are going to go over that period. Revenue into the National Land Transport Fund remains primarily from road user charges and fuel excise taxes, along with tolling and some other things making up much smaller streams at the moment. So as such, the fund remains oversubscribed, and we're continually looking at how we can improve and increase revenue streams into that fund over time. The large program of roads of national significance means that prioritisation at all levels is really critical, and that's something I talked about with the RTC in regard to the RLTP discussions we'll be having over the 2026 year on Monday. We can't predict what the GPS 2027 will look like, but with 17 RONs, roads of national significance, all in various stages of development, I'd suggest there'll continue to be a focus on delivering those. We've recently had a strategy refresh under our new CEO. It's really clarified 6 roles that we play as an agency. We have many different responsibilities, so it's nice to set those out clearly. We are a planner, and that's primarily, I guess, the purpose of our contribution to future-proof. We're also an investor, so we invest in our own roads, but also the roads of other road controlling authorities, primarily councils. We're a regulator of many things in the land transport network, a deliverer, an asset manager, and a customer service provider. I've gone to the next slide, just shows the regional distribution that we have across the country. So my role there, looking after the Bay of Plenty and Waikato. I've got a regional leadership team that support me to connect into local authorities. As I come around and do inductions with the individual councils, you'll meet some of those people, and they cover all the various aspects of our operation, those roles that I just identified that we undertake. As I mentioned, I sit on the Regional Transport Committee, which is, I guess, a more of a here and now strategic level than what I believe the future-proof work to be. I thought I'd outline a little bit why we value future-proof agency. So it really helps us as staff of the agency look beyond a current GPS setting and current constraints of funding and budget constraints, etc., to have that longer term view of the transport network and the state highway system and how that connects and grows alongside the ever-changing, rapidly changing golden triangle environment in which future-proof operates. We do have a long-term 30-year strategy called Arataki that's being revised currently as well, with a lot of input and engagement with staff from the local authorities across the country, including future councils. You'll hear me say there's simply not enough funding to do everything everyone wants us to do, but any aligned regional approach alongside strategic advocacy at a forum like this helps ensure that what we are funded to do is going to help meet the needs of future populations within the future-proof area. So I'll hear a heap of things at the induction sessions I do with individual councils. I'll hear a heap of things around this table that will be really valuable through my role to feed back into the business and upwards towards the CE and board and those kind of functions too. As an example of the value we see in future-proof, the recent work that has been undertaken on the Hamilton to Tauranga study, which I believe we'll hear a little bit about soon, will help underpin work that we currently have funded in the NLTP period for a corridor plan for what happens beyond Cambridge to Piarere and Tauriko State Highway 29 as two roads of national significance with a big chunk of State Highway 29 between them that currently has no funded plans in place for improvements. Likewise, we've got a similar plan just outside the future-proof area that will be developed for State Highway 1 from Tiro to Waiouru. So fairly critical routes where the level of service will need to change over time to meet the increase those state highways are encountering. Put up Southern Links. I'll talk a little bit to that, and I'll talk a little bit to Cambridge to Piarere as well, which I don't have a slide on, but I'm going to take Southern Links as read in terms of you've probably seen the map before and talked about the route because it's been a project that's been kicking around for a very long time. We had an announcement from our minister around $100 million that will over the next 2 years help us get to the next stage of development of Southern Links. So we completed an investment case, and that now helps us finalise the scope, including all the final kind of form and function of the locations of interchanges and things like that. We are about to enter market sounding for a technical advice, which is may even already be on GETS for appointment in the new year of professional services. We want to get Southern Links as ready as possible for construction over the next 2 years using that funding that has been released. So there's initial site investigations that will be undertaken that will go towards informing consenting and statutory approvals, including some geotech work. We have a really strong tangata whenua working group, which is looking at wetlands and archaeological sites currently with our project team. And we're working with council staff really closely through the future-proof transport working group and at an individual council level around network planning as well, and how all this will fit alongside local networks. We could potentially start construction in June 2027, but there is no construction funding allocated at the moment. And that's the same for Cambridge to Piarere. There is no construction funding allocated, although Cambridge to Piarere, as we talked at RTC the other day, is much closer to being shovel ready. So Cambridge to Piarere, we are continuing geotech investigations at the moment. If we were to obtain construction funding, hopefully sometime next year, we would then have a tender process to define who is going to deliver that road. And we'd be looking at a mid to late 20 start ideally, but that's all subject to funding. We were granted resource consents and the designated route has confirmed there. There's an online and an offline section, so we don't quite know how any eventual contract would quite look at this point. We had a really successful community open day on the 19th of November in Cambridge. Gained a lot of interest. There's a cool flyover video that really shows the extent. If you haven't seen that, that's on our website, or we can afterwards as well. There's a lot more information out there. I guess the final remark I'd make before we jump to another partner would be, over the course of EPIC, over the next 3 years, really happy to bring to the table the right NZTA people as well, if we want to do a deeper dive into anything, any of the projects within future-proof, or maybe anything else that might impact on the region, such as, you know, some of the time of use legislation or changes to fleet-wide road user charges and how our revenue stream, that kind of stuff. I'll leave it there for now because I've only had 3 slides, so it's not quite a death, hopefully. It's a coma by PowerPoint.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andrew. Sarah, we'll move to you. And if you can briefly introduce yourself and your role, and then take us through your slides.
Pai. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou. I'm Sarah Stevenson, the Housing and Urban Development Director for Waikato and Bay of Plenty. I am 4 months into my role, and I have to say one of the incredible benefits of Future-Proof as a collective is that it's enabled me to quickly develop relationships in the region and understand the Future-Proof partners' aspirations and objectives, and some of the challenges as well. I cannot compete with Andrew and NZTA in terms of the quantum of physical delivery on the ground, but I can compete in terms of the number of slides. I've just got the one. In terms of a high-level summary of HUD's role, I guess we set the national direction, and that's in terms of government investment in housing, but also regulatory levers for unlocking capacity, so infrastructure and zoning, to get housing supply unlocked and also get well-functioning urban areas. Locally, in terms of system leadership, I sit on the Waikato Housing Initiative Leadership Group, and that's given me a great insight into the local housing providers and the developers, and the housing objectives of councils, or at least Hamilton City Council. We have a monitoring and evaluation function. We regularly release housing market updates, which look at gaps in housing supply and capacity. Those aren't publicly released, but we do release them to Future Proof and to other urban growth partnerships. And through the information we get back from Future Proof, that means we can really match our monitoring and evaluation with our understanding of feasible development capacity on the ground. So it's quite a good connection in and out. It's specifically Future Proof's FDS being a key input. Policy development, I mentioned the system leadership. In terms of the specific levers we use to lead the system, that's the government policy statement on housing and urban development, and also under the RMA, the national policy statement for urban development. And that national direction has to be given effect to through local spatial strategies and regional and district plans. So Future Proof is great for enabling the connection between that high-level national setting and plans and plan changes on the ground. Going back the other way again, Future Proof is a good mechanism that I use for ensuring local insights get back into the policy processes and reviewing or redeveloping those national instruments. Investment management, we have a function in leading the government's housing investment. So there was recently released a new housing investment plan and flexible fund for affordable rentals and social housing. And Hamilton's been identified as a priority centre in respect of that investment. Ministerial support, I think this is probably an example of one of the real benefits, at least for me, of Future Proof and the relationships and insights we get. So HUD and especially my team, I've mentioned we provide the local insights into policy development. That's across HUD and also other central government agencies, MFE, DIA, etc. RM reforms, fast track legislation, the insights I get through Future Proof have let me feed intel back into the centre, but also into the housing investment approach and that flexible fund I mentioned. So the technical material that I can access and understand more deeply, because we're a partner to Future Proof, that's the growth strategy, the FDS corridor strategies, or your priority growth areas are absolutely gold for me personally, especially 4 months into the role. It's really helped me come up to speed, at least to a certain extent. We also advise the Minister, so that is Honourable Chris Bishop, the Minister for Housing and Urban Development, but also the Minister for RM Reform and Minister for Transport, you name it. We advise Minister Bishop on his ministerial engagements and visits and meetings, including with Future Proof, and Future Proof met with him earlier in September. We also work really closely, and I think one of the big benefits is that you've got DIA, NZTA, Kāinga Ora and HUD around the table. So even offline, us central government peeps can catch up and make sure we're connected in terms of the information we're getting from Future Proof, but also the information we're feeding into those central government processes. And on that, the central government processes, just to wrap up, I think Future Proof for me has been incredibly valuable because I'm 4 months into my role, but also in the context of reform, there is so much changing. Consenting pathways and timeframes, RM reform, local government and its governance, infrastructure, funding and financing, and Future Proof has helped connect us central government people to the people in the sub-region, and that is so important when things are changing, because regardless of the frameworks, relationships and conversations and insights endure. So yeah, I can heartily endorse HUD's participation in Future Proof, yeah. And I guess the last thing to say, everything we get through Future Proof enables us to do our best to enable fixes from a central government perspective, free and frank advice, serving the government of the day, but really, really value the insights we get through Future Proof. Elder.
Thank you, Sarah. We'll now move on to Mark, to Kāinga Ora. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks, Bill, and kia ora tātou, everybody. Yeah, I have the good fortune to be the Regional Director for the Waikato and the Bay of Plenty of these Kāinga Ora. I won't go through everything to do with our core role. Everyone either knows it or has an opinion on it, and it's been fairly public of recent times. The summary of all that changes, we are very much just focused back on that core mandate around our social housing function and looking after the customers that live within those homes. That looks like around about 9,000 assets and 23,000 customers across the Bay of Plenty Waikato area. When I bring that down to future-proof areas, the 4 areas, it looks like about 5,500 assets and about nearly 15,000 customers across the area. So it's the biggest part of our portfolio and focus. Those assets are basically, a bunch of them are all new. We've added around about 1,500 new homes in the last 3 years within the future-proof area. And then there's none in the middle. And then there's a huge amount that are 48 years and above, and most of those are heading more towards the 58 years and above. So that portfolio makeup actually presents some opportunities for how we can contribute as the doer and the renewal of our asset base over time in a future-proof context. So in terms of future-proof, our role really is I'm looking to align our investment program as much as possible with the future-proof future direction, whether that's through supply, and over the last little period of time that has been through a reasonable amount of supply. The second bit, though, is now we have also a mandate to be looking at a reasonable amount of divestment, which could create additional opportunities if we align that with the future land use patterns, and particularly partnering with the private sector and getting them into the development opportunity, because we own, as I said, a significant number of properties that are basically a 3-bedroom house stuck in the middle of an 800 square metre section, and lots of them are contiguous. So there's a genuine opportunity to create leverage of investment to actually change some outcomes in certain areas, alongside creating a pipeline of investment that means we can work with the partners, with the councils, etc., to create an investment funding and financing level of certainty, particularly when it comes to infrastructure provision. The second area is we have a specific focus and have participated quite a lot in the Huntly PDA area, or the Rahui Pōkeka, where we have a disproportionately large representation in that community, and looking to work through there. And within the city, Enderley Fairfield priority development area is a big focus for us, in an area where we have an opportunity to partner with council, iwi, the direction of that area for reinvestment. The last area is we used to have quite a large function of urban development. Now it's considerably smaller, but we do also play a role alongside HUD, and I'll just quickly explain how that works in a minute, across all 5 urban growth partnerships across New Zealand. So I sit on smart growth as well, alongside Andrew, and then we also are involved in the other urban growth partnerships in Auckland, Wellington, and Christchurch, around the role of Crown and Crown investment that we can potentially align to try and create some change and learn from each of those different areas. So that's basically our role in this. And the last thing that's always worth just clarifying, I think, is in terms of how do we work with MHUD, because people get us mixed up all the time. Think of Sarah as my big sister. I always think of you as my big sister, Sarah. They set our policy, they set our funding, and then we are basically the builder and the manager of in particular the social housing stock. And then the last thing is I'm fairly passionate about affordable housing outcomes, and through the Regional Housing Initiative, we'll take every opportunity to find ways that we could better utilise our role and function alongside the likes of yourselves, and particularly the future land use planning approach, to enable more affordable housing, genuine affordable housing outcomes. And in this case, you know, the majority of those affordable housing outcome challenges is actually in the cost of the land as the component of the development, and Future Proof has a significant impact in what the future cost structure of that land is going to look like. So that is partly a Kāinga role, partly we can see the challenges when we don't have an affordable housing, and we have a big gap in between social housing here, the market's producing over there, that hole in the middle. Yeah, that's me.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Vanessa.
Mark, thank you, Bill. My role as a partnership director with Department of Internal Affairs. Firstly, worth noting that Department of Internal Affairs has a wide range of government functions, from passport, citizenship applications, digital lead for government, gambling regulation, charities regulation, a whole lot of things. I sit firmly in the local government part of the department, and much as Andrew described his role within the NZTA, is very much a conduit into the organisation for you. So although I sit within the local government space, I'm clearly able to, you know, help with other issues that you may encounter that sit more widely than local government. But within the Secretary for Local Government space, the core DIA functions are around what's on the screen in terms of, it's really the stewardship of the local government system. And when I come to my slides later on, you may be asking yourself what that means, and we will get there. But so very much about administering the local government legislation and supporting you as councils to undertake their roles. Outside of Future Proof, big part of my role is to hold the relationships with you as individual councils primarily through your CE and your mayor or chair. So that continues outside of the partnership. But I'll just really echo the points that Sarah made around the benefits for agencies, and I hope they are mirrored for you in terms of how we see the role. I'm one of 4 partnership directors based around the country, and between us we cover all of the other urban growth partnerships as well. And I guess it's also a very important point to make is that as the implementation advisor, Robert is a key part of our conduit, into urban growth partnerships, but also because he is well respected and has a great deal of knowledge it makes life a lot easier in terms of accessing the information quickly, but also getting a sounding for what is happening in the sub-region. So I'll leave it there and I'll come back to you later on.
Okay, thanks, Vanessa. So I'll just take a quick pause if there's 2 or 3 quick questions, and then we'll move on. Bearing in mind, we will be breaking for morning tea just after 11, and the opportunity also for you to pick up in particular with government. Yeah, Tim.
Thank you. Andrew, I just wondered if I could ask you, given how long Southern Links has been on the drawing board, because it's in excess of 30 years without ever having political consensus. You've mentioned, I mean, clearly there's progress with where things are at and the potential for a start in 2 years' time, but no construction funding allocated at the moment. Can you just give us an idea of what the current political environment in Parliament is, as to how likely it is that we can go with confidence into a 2-year construction phase, or is it still completely up in the air?
Yeah, it's hard for me to give an opinion on confidence, but I would suggest yes, it is up in the air. There's some significant prioritisation that does need to occur within the constraints of fund government has available in the National Land Transport Fund. The broader context would be 17 roads of national significance across the country, and a need to figure out which ones can go first, which ones are ready, which ones require significant more work, and which geographic locations are going to proceed first as well. So there's a whole big exercise being done in the background beyond in terms of
Possibility of a change of government here. The work that's being done to now, could we get to a point where it's unstoppable? Could it still be stoppable?
From what I see, generally these things are unstoppable when there's a spade in the ground.
Up until that point, okay. I was hoping that wouldn't be your answer.
Deny.
Kia ora, Andrew. I just want to get some clarity around what do you mean by, in terms of Māori perspective, regards to roads significance. Give me some clarity around that. And the reason why I raised that, because there's certain areas that are, and they're actually patungātapu to us, which is sacrosanct, not significant, but the name and the whole meaning of the area is taken away because it's been used for a particular purpose. And I know that you said that you have got an iwi group together on board, but I just want to hear what's your understanding of that in regards to how we think about it. That's more than significance, especially if you are going to change a particular area into a road. And I'll give you an example. Tamahere. The name came from Mahinarangi carrying a child across the river. And now we have a bridge where she actually crossed on the way to her husband-to-be, which is Turongo. And everybody only knows that we have a bridge there, but they don't know the significance of the patungātapu, the sacrosanct area of that area. And I'm hoping that you take special thinking in regards to having the history and the kōrero remain as we all see it, as we develop certain things, well, especially infrastructures anyway. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Nanaia. Yeah, 100% we have really close partnerships with iwi on all of our RONs and indeed our roading projects. Would suggest we have cultural funding within the project budgets that is allocated to being able to tell that story. How that story is told, whether it's through PO or whether it's through naming conventions, that's to be defined in that partnership. So each project, there is a fairly tight project working group of tangata whenua. So for example, on Cambridge to Piarere, we work really closely with Ngāti Hoa and Ngāti Koraki Kahukura representatives. They've supported us and our team along the way. The new PO at State Highway 29 and 1 roundabout at Piarere. We worked really closely with Uncle read on the installation of that just before he passed, and continue to represent a cultural history, I guess, of tangata whenua throughout our project.
I'm also referring about the past as well, where there's things being taken away, and not just the present.
Yeah, and we are a treaty partner, obviously, as well. We have certain obligations under the treaty that we monitor really closely and take into account. Yeah. We also have a Māori strategy called Te Ara Kotahi. Have to take you through that at some stage as well. Kia ora.
Thank you, Andrew.
Here, Mike, last question, because we didn't need to move on.
Thank you through Chair Bill. So this is for Andrew again. Sorry, you're copying all the questions. And because I'm from Waipa and from close to Cambridge, just reiterating the fact that the road of national significance that is not quite yet funded between Cambridge and Paraire is there's a big ask there for a northern access on ramp. Is to take some congestion out of that particular town. I know you've heard that loud and clear, but this is just another forum just to push that because the funding hasn't been given. So there's always, where there's hope, there's a chance. So just your comments on that.
Maria. Then we'll move on.
Kia ora, Vanessa. I'm looking this way. The hook, Andrew. Tēnā koe, Vanessa. My question is in the city regional deal space. And so what are the plans for the government next year? And is there a possibility where future-proof Metro Hamilton will be invited to submit a deal?
I'm trying to think of a way of pushing this back on Andrew, but I can't. With city and regional deals, what I can tell you about is kind of what is happening now and where it's been announced that the government is working with 3 regions to plan to have a deal signed by the end of the year. And the plan is also for the second and third of those regions to progress to a deal next year. That's next by the end of financial year. Those regions have been announced as Auckland. Broadly speaking, we'll say Western Bay plenty, but with Tauranga and the regional council there, and in the South Island, Otago Central Lakes being Queenstown Lakes, Central Otago and Otago, that grouping. So one of those will progress. At this stage, there have been no decisions made about what will happen to future waves. I think the government's spoken about them as waves before. So when it's backtracking to earlier this year, but the end of February, when all the proposals were received and certainly the whole of the Waikato one was assessed and the feedback given, there was a thought then that there would be subsequent tranches or waves would have been progressed by now, but that decision has yet to be made about what's going to happen. So I will be keeping in close contact with you all about that, quite what that would look like and what the wider region might wish to do, what you wish to do. That will be up to you how you wish to progress. But there's certainly no plans at this point to be inviting specific groups in. I haven't really answered your question, but yeah.
Okay. Going to skip this slide because there is a report on governance in the formal meeting, and I'll pick up those matters at that point in time. Robert.
Right, and I'm going to skip a whole bunch of the next one so you can actually hear from the technical people who have something new to say. We will talk about our implementation plan later on in a paper. And so we might just move all the way through to reporting. And you'll recall from those of you who attended my councillor or our councillor roadshow, we talked about all the different kinds of reporting Future-Proof undertake. In your packs, you've got a detailed report on the fast track applications. I think in this case, and mindful of time, we'll focus on Sonia in the priority development areas. So away you go.
Morena, everybody. So I'll be very quick. This is a very brief snapshot of the type of work the Priority Development Area Working Group pulls together with regard to monitoring and reporting of the priority development areas. It's a quick introduction ahead of a full report, which I will bring to this forum in February, and my report will delve into more detail about each of the 6 priority development areas. So basically, Future-Proof identified 21 areas initially as growth areas, and those 21 were narrowed down to 6 priority development areas, which we are now focusing on. And this metric here really identifies the key, the 3 readiness enablers that we use to assess the 6 priority development areas. And it's very difficult to see, but the first enabler is the strategy enabled. So this is really testing, is there sub-regional alignment? The second is whether or not the area is plan enabled, which is based around planning, are the planning provisions in place? And the third is infrastructure enabled. So are the servicing pathways defined? And under those enablers, we then track the delivery metrics. And so again, you can't quite see that in the slide here, but we're looking at the forecast number of homes projected. We look at how many of those homes have got consent and how many have actually been built. And for commercial industrial areas, we look at projected land versus consented and delivered land. So the focus is really on delivery, not just planning. And in short, we use real-time data to understand what's moving, what's stalled, and where coordinated action is needed, and in turn, keeping all partners aligned and accountable. So just moving on. Yeah. Lyndall, thank you. So to support reporting, the working group also updates a set of priority development maps, and you'll shortly see, once we get this loaded, a spatial animation of the six mapped areas, showing how they fit together as a connected network supporting housing supply, industrial land, transport integration, and infrastructure staging. And this is very much the spatial view underpins the previous slide and the metrics that we report on. Excellent. Yeah, and this is, you can find this on our story map online, which you'll have links to. So please feel free to go back and take a closer look. But again, this is a high-level view today, and a more detailed report will be coming to you in February, which will break down each area in detail in terms of what's complete, what's underway, the key dependencies, and areas where alignment or decisions are needed from this group. So, kia ora. Thank you.
Robert.
So again, in the interests of time, I'll just maybe pass through the other slides in the slide pack, other than to say the other ways that you'll see reporting from us in the new year is how are we going against commitments. And we just had that conversation with Andrew about when is funding committed and when can we actually rely on a project being delivered. How we're going with delivering all of the projects that are required to make all of our growth areas work. So that's the commitments you make in your LTPs, the Crown makes through NZTA and other critical infrastructure provision decisions, things like that. You get a traffic light report on those in the new year. And obviously I've spoken before to your councils about the priority we're giving to those fast track applications that impact on more than 3 of the partners, and where collaboration in terms of working with the fast track applicants is really important. In your packs, you've got a traffic light report with quite a lot of detail for each of the sectors. We've divided up Hamilton metro area into core sectors, because there's so many of those applications in that metro area, just how we're going on working with the developers, and we're making quite good progress. You'll see if you choose to dive into those reports. Obviously, some frustrations for some developers that things are not happening as fast as the government promised them they would, but the fast track process still is a legal process and still requires us to work through issues like council investment to support the fast track applications and what the developer investments are going to look like in terms of infrastructure and things like that. And with that, we're going to move to hearing from our policy and planning working group leads on the work that they do in terms of development of strategy and preparing us for a future regional spatial plan and how we might fit into that.
Just before we do that, quick question, Nanaya.
Yes. Thank you, through the chair. This is for Sonia. I just wanted to know, Sonia, in terms of your metrics, is a water analysis included with that in terms of your infrastructure? Okay, all right, because you didn't mention it, that's why I wanted to know. Kia ora, thank you.
Hey, welcome Miffy and Lisette.
Yep, kia ora tātou. So I'm the lead of the Policy and Planning Working Group, and we're responsible for those things that you can see
pull
on the slide.
The microphone a bit
Sorry.
closer, thanks, Miffy.
Okay,
Yeah, better.
so the Policy and Planning Working Group, we're responsible for these things that you see on the slide. So if you would like to go to the next one, please, Lyndall. Okay, so a key output of the partnership is obviously the future-proof strategy. So it provides an overall framework for aligning the plans and strategies of the partner organisations and sets out how we will grow and change over the next 30 years. So it is the future development strategy for the sub-region, and it identifies spatial locations in which our residential and business growth will be provided over the long term, along with the infrastructure needed to support that growth. And that's as required by the National Policy Statement on Urban Development. However, the FDS does form part of a wider strategy, which aims for that boundaryless approach to planning across the sub-region and making sure our sub-region can thrive. So Futureproof has a strong focus on achieving a more compact and concentrated urban form by building on the existing growth patterns and providing a mix of development opportunities. So we've got infill, we've got brownfield, we've got greenfield, and that's supported with a range of transport options. So this allows for that growth both up and out as required by the MPS for urban development. The strategy is informed by a range of evidence. So we've got the transport business case, which is the key one, council growth strategies and specific studies, some of which you will be hearing about later. Next slide, please. So another key input is the Housing and Business Development Capacity Assessment, otherwise known as HBA, which is much shorter and snappier. So the purpose of the HBA is to provide information on the demand and supply of housing and business land and to quantify the development capacity that is sufficient to meet the expected demand for the short, medium and long term. So that's up to 30 years. So that's a key part of us knowing whether we've done our job in providing for growth in the sub-region. Next slide. Okay, so what we saw in the last HBA, which was prepared in, the housing was in 2023, the business in 2024. So for the residential component, we saw that we have some shortfalls of residential, but those aren't actually due to the lack of zoned land, but really rather the likelihood of it being realised, because as you may be aware, we have some issues with infrastructure constraints and the market has been quite subdued. So there is land there, it just may not be able to be realised in the time frame, well, in the short term anyway. So for the business land, the HBA shows that overall across the whole sub-region, we have enough land identified. However, it's not necessarily in the right places. So there's potential for local insufficiencies, particularly around Hamilton City. So there's more work going on to look at that. The impact of the fast track applications will obviously need to be considered for the next iteration of the HBA, given that we have that large number of urban development projects in the future-proof area, particularly around Hamilton City, and most of those weren't actually included in the strategy, so they haven't been factored into the HBA. Next one. So the FDS is supported by an implementation plan. So this sets out the actions that the partners will undertake to implement the strategy. It sits outside of the strategy and is updated on an annual basis. It identifies those critical strategy enablers, so that critical infrastructure that Robert was talking about earlier, that's required to deliver the settlement pattern, and the actions that Future-Proof is working on towards our 7 transformational moves. So you will be asked to endorse the annual implementation later in the formal meeting, so I won't go over too much. But we've taken a 40-page document and turned it into a 2-page infographic for you. So here you go. And I'll now hand over to Lizette.
Kia ora koutou. I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of 2 spatial studies that are being undertaken that were in the annual implementation plan, and the first being the North Waipa South Hamilton spatial study. But given I'm just giving you an overview, I've also got Jim and Vanessa here who can answer any detailed questions as they are involved in the details. So in terms of this study, the focus is to establish efficient economic connections between the centres, the employment hubs, the metro areas, the ports and the airports within that area, and the areas it connects to in the Waikato region. So you can see the geographic focus area on the map there. But arrows also show considerations towards Rukahia and Ohopo. And it's based on a corresponding priority development area, linking back to what's been said earlier about PDAs. The area, you'll probably be aware, has been under quite some pressure and interest in development. So the studies really wants to ensure that the future growth needs in the area are clearly understood, identified, and that growth and investment can be well coordinated regardless of organisation. So we're thinking boundaryless, as has also been noted earlier. We're also noting in the study the road of national significance, so linking back to NZTA. The intent is to add benefits, not shift them around the sub-region or undermine any existing strategies and plans, for example, for Hamilton and surrounding towns. It is closing this week, I think, for engagement. It's using scenarios at the moment to see preferred options. And the project team will then synthesise the results, and they'll be coming to FPIC next year. And then that work then informs the future development strategy, regional spatial strategy, and strategy for the area for whomever might need to use it. So in terms of the next study, it's Hamilton to Tauranga. This one is a bit broader. As you can see, it's a much larger geographical area. It focuses on that area around the East Coast main trunk line and the State Highway 1, State Highway 29 corridor. And we have smart growth as a key contributing partner, given the interest between the 2 cities. It's seeking to understand the potential changes in land use demand arising from the current and the planned transport investments in the corridor that you've heard from earlier as well. And what are the appropriate responses to achieve the best outcomes? It's also using scenarios to explore stakeholder preferences, and FPIC will be asked to consider and endorse the final study in February. And it's then intended to inform, again, those strategic documents and council strategy and planning. Finally, shall I mention the retirement living study is coming to you in just a little part to your formal meeting, but it's another study now completed. In short, it provides evidence base to inform future strategic thinking and broader strategic thinking on a particular area of interest, which is retirement living. Thank you.
Okay, so
I can briefly talk about system reform.
we'll
if you'd like,
come
or
back
break.
to system
Yep.
reform later on when Vanessa also presents. So we'll move on to the Transport Working Group. And I'm at this point, because I'm in terms of timing of everything, what I'm thinking we might do, I might convene the formal meeting at 11:30 and adjourn it, and depending how we go in terms of then having the presentation from Vanessa in terms of system reform as part of a workshop, and then we'll go back into the formal meeting, because I'd certainly like Vanessa to present on that, and also want to give you time for a cup of tea before we get into the meeting. Okay, welcome, Phil.
Chair, just
confirm how long I've got to talk? How long you'd like me to talk?
Well, I'd like to break for morning tea no later than 11:15.
Okay, thank you, everyone. In a similar vein to, introduce myself, Phil Hazelden. I'm a Principal Transport Planner at Hamilton City. And I'm also one of the co-chairs on your Transport Working Group, alongside a staff member from the Regional Council. Would be sitting here if they hadn't resigned, I think, last week. So, yeah. But the space we're in, just like the previous conversations, is that strategic space, that 30, 50-year lens.
Can you pull the microphone a bit
sorry.
closer? Thanks, Phil.
That better?
Yes, yeah.
You did say that, didn't you? So I think every big city across New Zealand has got what we've got. They've got their big long-term strategic plan, their 30, 50-year vision. And what we're talking about today and what we developed about 4 years ago is our metro area version of that. So we never really came up with a snappy name for it. So if you hear people talking about the Hamilton Waikato Metro Spatial Plan, Transport Programme, Business Case Recommended Programme, it's our real long-term transport vision. So a bit of context, sorry. Back in 2019, Future Proof, the partners got together and identified a series of problems and the fact that they wanted to do more of an NZTA style business case process, go through a problem identification exercise, really to understand the problem we're trying to face, come up with some solutions and talk to primarily our funders that we've got a strong evidence base. We understand what we're doing and we're trying to deal with that in a strategic way. So problems that are identified back then were really around poor alternatives to private cars, the need, we're not supporting our freight network enough. We need to do more with PT. We need more to alleviate things around transport equity and other social issues. And we need to do more in a sort of the rural network, broad assumptions and some problems back in 2019. So you scroll on and jumping into the actual business case work we did now. So we did quite a comprehensive piece of work. It took 18 months. And we started off like all good business cases do. We're trying to understand a problem we're trying to solve. And again, I'm not going to read off all these slides, but again, the problems that we found that we were trying to solve, what we needed to look at in the future were around that worsening congestion problem, particularly in our city centres and our regional centres. We still were doing good things in the public transport space, but we still weren't doing enough. We weren't really doing much to get more people to use public transport. And we weren't really doing that really good public transport or transport corridor in general, aligning with where we actually wanted to grow, where people wanted to live and where people were doing their jobs, going to their jobs. So we just wanted to do a bit more work in that space, get that land use and transport integration, put a little bit more science and logic to it. So jumping into now, if you like, fast forward 18 months, we did a lot of work, again, on a multimodal level, but unashamedly, there was a strong public transport focus to it. And we did come up with some key corridors that we wanted to look at in more detail, predominantly with a PT focus, but again, not forgetting that there's lots of other transport modes and there aren't that many transport corridors in Hamilton and the metro area anyway. So we did identify the corridors out towards the east, towards Ruakura, going west as well, so the old Central City Connector corridor. The corridor going up towards Te Rapa from the city centre and links to the airport as well. So again, this is with that future growth lens, that future job lens. Move on, sorry. And again, jump into some of the key recommendations that have fallen out of that programme, and we'll drill into some of these later. It did have that rapid transit focus. And what I mean by that, you see what Auckland's done with their Eastern Busway. You've seen the North Shore Busway. You've seen what Wellington's done with some aspects of Lambton Quay. Christchurch as well has got its own proposals. It's really just a step change in infrastructure for buses to give them that segregation. Stations or bus stops that look more like stations. It just elevates that PT experience, and also needs to have a certain level of patronage to support that. And our land use work, the growth work we've done since then over the last 4 years just supports that. So the questions we asked ourselves, could Hamilton and the metro area support that level of infrastructure and high quality PT provision? And the answer was yes, if we get our land use right. Very, very similar to what Chris Bishop is saying right now about aligning that quality growth along transport corridors. So that was one of the big things, obviously the land use, walking and cycling as part of that picture as well, that bigger program that we come up with, that does need to be in place to maximise some of the benefits. Excuse me, just need a drink. We did a lot of work on freight and logistics with a land use focus as well as a network focus, where smaller freight hubs could work along with the big ones like Ruakura. We've started looking at better use of the facilities we've got, so optimising our network. So we started looking at where bus lanes can be shared with freight. We started looking at special purpose vehicles lanes, so T2s, T3s, those sorts of things, exactly the sort of thing that Auckland's doing right now. And we've also got a lot of other series of interventions as part of our work programme, which includes everything from addressing rural access issues. We've got some unfunded projects that we've developed with our iwi partners around linking up rural marae with the network that we're talking about, and just some good old-fashioned general PT planning. So sorry, next slide, and I'll speed up. Sorry, I've missed a couple of slides. Okay, sorry, can we just go back a couple? Yeah. So again, the programme back in, this is 2021, 22 now, did give us a bit of science on the progression of some of the facilities and some of the interventions that we need to consider in the future. So if you look at the top of that slide, it does give the early focus, the 3 to 10 year focus, the 10-year, 15 up to 50-year focus. It gives us an idea on to maximise the benefits of what we identified back in the day, the progression of our new frequent PT routes, what patronage we could get, what journey time savings we could make, and also suggested rollout of the sort of micro-mobility network to support that sort of first mile, last mile elements of this future network. And that went down quite well back in the day. We got some nice feedback from ministers and people that sat there before you. Sorry, next slide, Lyndall. So again, this is just to give you a bit of a timeline to prove that we have actually been doing some work over the last few years as part of Future Proof. So you look at 1, 2 and 3, that's back in the day, that's what I'm talking about, that's the programme development. Then we've moved into sort of the 4 and 5 space where we're starting to look a little bit further at, does some of this rapid transit stuff actually work? Can it work with general traffic? Does it support freight? Can our bridges handle this sort of thing? So again, just can we move forward with this concept that we've developed? The Regional Council has done some great work in terms of aligning PT with infrastructure provision. PT Pathways was the project. We've done some early work to support the early, this is now about 18 months ago, NCTA thinking around the roads of national significance. Would be number 5. So that was really related to how our programme could work in with Southern Links. We've done some work on Park and Ride. We've done some work on freight, which is a great piece of work. We did a lot of work with the actual industry then, and that feeds all into our corridor work we're talking about now. And you've gone into 8, 9 and 10. That's a space we're in right now where we're looking at those corridors that I mentioned earlier and looking at them from a general traffic, freight perspective, a bus perspective to give you that staged progression on what we think those corridors could look like over the next 30 years. And that's a presentation I'd love to do due in February. So again, I'm just going to expand a little bit on some of those things that were in that timeline. This is a proof of concept work. So this took our original bus rapid transit concepts and just tested them. Could we really actually do them? What were the operational issues behind them? What were the infrastructure challenges? Were we talking rubbish, 18 months prior? Could we actually do this? And the answer was yes, let's keep going. If you look at the next slide, please, Lyndall. This is the freight work I'm talking about. Again, so don't get too buried into the actual slide itself, but I think take some confidence that we've got, this is 2038 network. We've also looked at 2055 network. So we've got a really good grasp of where our freight's going to be, how far, say, Ruakura or Crawford Street, or where all our centres, our jobs, the airport as well, of course, is going to grow. So that's factored into our thinking and our timing. The next slide. This is the PT Pathways slide I mentioned, a great piece of work. Just looked at optimising what local councils do with the regional council in terms of trying to align the rollout of bus services, particularly the frequent network, with infrastructure. So this is gold dust for informing funding decisions and the long-term plan. Next slide, please. Just touching on the park and ride work. Again, don't get buried too much in the detail, but obviously part of our future network does need future park and ride. So we've looked at sites in Ruakura, down by the airport, up in the Te Awa vicinity. We know in the future with our potential bus rapid transit fleets, if that's the way we go, that we're going to need somewhere to stable these vehicles. We're going to need to charge them because they're all going to be, fancy electric buses. And we need to turn them around. Why can't we combine that with park and ride sites as well? So this is just good strategic planning. We don't need it now, but we might need it in 10 years' time. Next slide, please. So a lot of our thinking today, again, this is bus numbers around a 2038 network. So a lot of our thinking today is focused around the importance of a central city street. The evidence at the moment is pointing us towards Anglesey Street for a focus on PT. Now, I appreciate, Deputy Mayor Jeff, you want to go back and have a good chat about that, and I absolutely welcome that. So nothing's carved in stone. I think on this slide, focus more on the numbers than the actual spatial location, because basically what we're saying, if you look at our land use, you look at the growth of our city, which we've hugely underestimated in our planning before, we are going to get a lot of people wanting to use buses and they want to be in the city centre. We need to work out where they're going to go. So what I'm saying, I think, is the city centre, in terms of all those routes align, we need to really work out and provide some great facilities on one of our city centre streets, and then working in with all the other demands of the city centre. So next slide, Andrew talked about Southern Links, so I won't dwell on it. So just wanting to say that your working group is working very closely with NZTA on their investment case, and trying to work out how our programme, how our future routes, particularly our rapid transit links to the airport, can fit into staging and progression of whatever happens with Southern Links. Next slide. So this is my favourite. I think you've seen it before. This is our future London Underground map. This is probably a 2055 network. And it really is there. I'm not going to read out every single bullet point, but it really tries to say to you what the business case did back in 2021, 22, and what we've done now. We've got some great work around things like park and ride, the rapid transit network, scalability and flexibility. This network is there to respond to growth. We can turn it on and off related to decisions that are made by people like yourselves and fast track and all those sorts of things. I'll dwell on 2 points. The evidence-based planning bit. Our investors, our traditional funders like NZTA, they demand excellence from us in terms of justification and problem definition before they give us any bit of money. So the work we've done to develop our problem, our solution, our optioneering, I think is gold dust. And I'll focus on the second to bottom one, staging and sequencing. This is strategic planning. This doesn't all need to happen tomorrow. This is our forward thinking. Some of the things we will need within 10 years, but we're looking at very conscious of the directions we're getting. We're looking at sort of short-term optimization, using what we've got better, but we can't ignore the long term. We are going to need to buy land, potentially buy property, do some big things because we're a big, important, growing city. So next slide. We can actually skip through that one for time. We'll go on to the last one. So what are we doing right now, right this second? What are my team and myself working on right now? So the blue stuff is operations. So the regional council, we're going through a massive tendering exercise now, which includes new frequent bus networks. We're doing lots of local bus service planning, all consistent with our programme. We're doing an awful lot of work on planning for zero emission buses led by the regional council. So in terms of what they look like, where they're going to stable, how they're going to work, what we need to do. Again, I'm going to say staging and sequencing a million times, but it's so important. We don't need to do all this at once. So we're going to give you an evidence-based, I guess, 30-year stage of interventions to consider in long-term planning. And also, we are very much aligned, I think, in the new RMA proposals, the things that Minister Bishop is saying, particularly in terms of embracing the mixed use, embracing the intensification along transport corridors. I think this work is just singing to what the government is saying to us right now. From the red stuff, the infrastructure side, last LTEP funded us 4 corridor studies. So they're all based on the network that I showed you earlier. So we're looking at freight, PT, walking and cycling interventions along the Tarapa corridor into the city centre. The Cross City Connector, so that's basically Frankton to Ruakura. Another eastern section, but the Clyde Street section, that's going to be more PT focused. That's linking to the medical school, to the university, to the residential areas out there. That's the existing Meteor route. That's come through as a very key route for us. And we are trying to work out a link to the airport. That could be through State Highway 3, that could be the through Peacock. It's really dependent on what Southern Links ends up doing. This is not just a Hamilton thing. All the big stuff and small stuff that our partners are doing contributes to this. This is why I mentioned in the regional council work, but let's not get things, major transport projects like Cambridge Connections that are very consistent with the aspirations of our programme, and there are others across all the partners. And we are, again, continuing to work with our partners on NZTA, on Southern Links, and that is actually taking up a lot of our transport working group time, and I'll leave it there.
Thanks very much, Phil. Jeff, could we just hold your question a moment? I just wanted to do the Tahuya business case because that finishes off the presentation.
Sure.
And then I'll come back to that.
Okay,
Robert.
I'll just grab the mic for 30 seconds, and I think I want to acknowledge the effort of Phil and the team in terms of the presentation you just saw as the basis of material that we presented, or Phil and the team presented, to the Infrastructure Commission, Te Waihanga, for their review and evaluation as to whether or not the work that we're doing is strategically aligned and is sufficiently important to be included in New Zealand's national infrastructure prioritisation pipeline, which is something that this government instituted when it came in. And we just in the last 2 weeks got endorsement that yes, the problem is correct, the solution, without getting into the detail of where the corridors are going, is properly justified, and that we have got what's called stage 1 endorsement into the pipeline, which puts us on the same level now as Christchurch with its planning for its metro network. So that's actually quite a big improvement. It means outside of Auckland and Christchurch, I think we're the only growth partnership that has got that level of endorsement and that sense of prioritisation for our program in the Te Waihanga infrastructure pipeline. So really good acknowledgement of the quality of that work. And now we're going to bring in a conversation which is a new one for Future Proof in some ways, which is the connection to Auckland and how we think about our rail connection and public transport connectivity to Auckland. So at the last triennium, it was decided that because of the significance of that conversation to the future-proof settlement pattern, that future-proof would be able to have a role in forming a view before the decisions are made about business cases. So you will be briefed on the business cases that are coming through for the Regional Council and NZTA to think about. But I'll let Phil talk to that a bit more. Hope I haven't stolen your thunder.
No, not at all. Morena
Welcome,
koutou.
Phil.
Thank you, Chair. So as I've already introduced myself, I'm the Director of Transport for the Waikato Regional Council, but in the context of Future Proof, I'm the Chair of the Project Control Group and a member of the Implementation Management Group. The connection with Tahuya, so just by way of a very quick introduction, this is a interregional passenger rail service that commenced in 2021 with 12 weekly services and is currently now running 30 weekly services. Over the next 7 or 8 months, the future of the train will be considered in a range of different ways, and some of those connect back through to the Transport Working Group. So if you go to the next slide, Lyndall. The Regional Council's currently got 6 work streams underway and has been reporting these through the Future Proof Public Transport Subcommittee in the last triennium. In this new triennium, the majority of this work will be presented through the new Regional Public Transport Subcommittee, and there's a paper on governance arrangements in your pack for the meeting later. Just picking one of those, next slide please, Lyndall. So the Future Proof Transport Working Group is putting some funding into supplement Regional Council funding around what's being called the Future Services Business Case. And this is an assessment of what, if the service were to continue beyond June next year, what the future options might be for implementing a rail service within the context of our regional public transport system. And it's looking at frequencies, it's looking at railway station locations up through Waikato District. It's looking at journey times, it's looking at future termination points, whether they are all the way into central Auckland or perhaps to Pukekohe or anywhere in between. And that work will be ready by the middle of next year, and it will come back through this group as part of the consideration. But just really today was about raising the awareness of that work that's underway with government as well as within the regional council in terms of the annual plan process and the support, I hope, of the partners in the room around the role that this provides in the context of public transport for that interregional trip. So yeah, that was kind of my majority of my thought, but we thought we might just put this on the table for you so you had some awareness of it.
Okay, thanks, Phil. We've got one last slide on Waters. We'll do that, and then I'll go to Jeff in terms of his question or questions. So welcome, Carl.
Hello, everybody. My name's Carl Pavlovich. I'm the Water Services Manager at Waipā District Council, but also the Chair of the Water Working Group. Just a single slide for you today. The major input to Future Proof from the Waters Working Group is the Three Waters Strategy. Three Waters Strategy was written in 2012, so it's quite old now. And the major piece of work that this group is trying to progress is an update to that strategy. So we've got through the first part, we've reviewed the existing strategy, but we're currently on hold because, as you all appreciate, there's some significant changes going on in the Three Waters space across the country, but in particular here in the Waikato as well, with the formation of EOI and also Waikato Waters Limited. So a decision was made to put that work on hold while the key staff who would all be involved in the progress of that strategy update go away and be involved in the establishment of their respective CCO. So there's not a lot to really talk about on this slide, other than to say this will become a topic as we move forward through this triennium and how those two entities form and deliver respective parts of that strategy. That's it.
Okay, thanks, Carl. Now, questions. We've got Jeff, I've got Liz and Eugene in that order.
Thank you. Question for Phil. Phil, thanks for your presentation, and there's a lot of great work going on there. Just in regard to the rapid transit preferred routes, the north-south and the use of Anglesey Street, or the proposed use of Anglesey Street, I'm concerned that this has not been strongly socialised with city councillors, really. It's never really been explicitly the subject of a political debate or a vote. And I'm concerned that there's not a political mandate to support Anglesey Street being used in this way. And I would suggest if it went to the current council now, there'd be very little support for it. So I'm concerned that this amount of work on this is going ahead at the rate it seems to be, in isolation, I guess, of the political environment. And I would suggest that it probably shouldn't be. What's your response to that?
Need to get the mics turned off.
Yeah. I absolutely acknowledge that. Without trying to make excuses, it was quite challenging over the last 18 months to get in front of councillors on this matter. But if that's an issue that's top of mind, then we need to address that. There's a fairly strong evidence base to suggest that we probably have got it right with Anglesey, but at the same time, of course, we're open to dialogue and conversation. Obviously, PT is part of a bigger city centre jigsaw. So obviously, we're looking at Tristram, we're looking at Victoria Street, all have got, I guess, different functions, different abilities, support land use, different jobs and people living alongside them. So we can go back and look at that. I think just key for me as part of the MSP work is that we do need a strong PT corridor in the city centre. I think that's coming through quite loud and clear in terms of the numbers, but in terms of spatially where that goes, and if that's a big issue for council, then we need to address it.
Thank you. I note that it's sort of described as a critical, the use of Anglesey Street to the delivery of this plan. And I also note that it talks on page 54 about for the delivery of the wireless network, it will feasibly need to be available and operating at its full capacity by the mid-2030s. So I guess that again just reinforces if our council was to make a resolution in coming months saying that it has no interest in using Anglesey Street as a bus route, where does that leave the strategy? Would you be, I guess you'd need to come back and we need to politically make a decision on what we want, yeah?
Yeah, and I think it needs to be a city-wide conversation, because if we prioritise one mode on one route, then we need to deal with others on others. So it's a conversation that's going to involve way more people than myself in terms of giving you technical advice. If we didn't do anything, then I guess it would jeopardise the benefits of the wider network. Or we talk about, if you don't do a fully segregated route, what do? You
Okay.
do something else.
All right. Well, I look forward to the debate back at Hamilton City Council.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I've got Liz, and Eugene, and then me and Mike.
Look, thank you, Phil. There's a lot in your report, and I imagine for a lot of new councillors sitting around this table, there's a heck of a lot of information to start to digest. I'm quite interested in the Hamilton to Tauranga new. I guess this is we spent a lot of focus on the Hamilton to Auckland last triennium, so the Hamilton to Tauranga is of interest. And I note now that you've got Cambridge included in that on the map. It's a very important part of that corridor. So I'm very aware that Waipa has been doing a lot of work, and might want to speak to this as well, around the Cambridge connections. So how does staff sort of see that Cambridge connections work integrating with this new corridor?
There's two questions there, I think, isn't there? I think, and Jim might be better off answering one of them, but I think with the alignment between Cambridge Connections and the MSP program in general is we're trying to solve the same problems. We're trying to do better with PT, we're trying to do better with integrating transport around land use, and we're trying to solve congestion. So that's why I mention it. There's strong alignment between Cambridge Connections and the MSP objectives as a whole. Whether they're 4 years old or 2 minutes old, they're still highly relevant and aligned. I think in terms of the spatial work, did you want to? So I haven't actually been involved in that much. I know that the MSP work is informing that.
I can grab it. Yeah. Maybe it's easier than bringing Jim to the table. So Future-Proof, in terms of Cambridge Connections directly, Future-Proof has used some of its budget to support some of the public transport evidence that's going into the Cambridge Connections work. The North Waipa South Hamilton study is identifying that connectivity to Cambridge, and there's a story coming out of Cambridge Connections about what does the connectivity look like on the western side of the river, and what might that mean in terms of connections to the airport, and what our aspirations are for growth of the airport. So that kind of thinking will come through when you see that study come through.
Eugene.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I don't have a question as such. Phil covered this off, but I just want to make a few comments around Te Huia. So, the Te Huia, there's a lot of decisions to be made in the next 6 months, and some of that's around this table, but this group, Future-Proof, should be future focused, and I think we need to make sure that we support Te Huia moving forward. So, in the I've been around, and it's when we stood this up, and it was It's probably one of the things I've probably been involved with over the time where if there was something that was going to make it a little bit difficult, this got the whole lot, whether it was COVID. Blocks of line was probably the biggest effect that this had. The AT network, the infrastructure in rail was very poor, probably throughout the country, but especially in the Auckland network. The 5-year trial, because of those blocks of lines and COVID, also, the real trial's only probably not been quite 4 years. And timetabling, emergency braking systems, all of these have had a whole lot of problems. Now we're sort of at a stage where we're meeting all of the KPIs of what the business case put out there. And moving forward, the electrification that came down to Papakura and Pukekohe, and then now the future Kiwi Rail's business case around electrification down to Te Rapa. The opening of the CRL in Auckland is going to be a real game changer. So I think that what I'm asking is that we look at it, because I know that Regional Council, they operate the service. Hamilton City Waikato District have invested into this process over the years. We've invested into land in the north of our district for future stations, etc. Yes, both councils do rely heavily on NZTA support on infrastructure in that space, but the ratepayers of both those, the city and the district, have invested as well. So we've got to have our vision set a bit further of not the now, but the future. So I just ask that we really consider support of Te Hui moving forward. And also there's decisions that are going to be made by the board, I think maybe, Andrew, in March, around about March, April, that will tell us where our direction is. But in the meantime, we should be looking at continuing to support this, because we've broken the back of it, the hard work's been done, and it seems to be going on an upwards trajectory. So,
okay, no,
thank
you, Eugene. Mayor Mike, and then Chair Warren.
Thank you, Bill. Just a couple of brief comments, really. Look, and it's addressed to Phil, really. So you sort of made a comment there, and it was pertinent that transport strategy isn't city centric; that it's region wide, and I think that's a really important thing to sort of reiterate. Liz covered off something I was going to sort of cover off there around Cambridge connections, but hey, a big ticket item for this region is an additional river crossing in the Cambridge area, and that's it's going to become an important part of any strategy for the region, and an expensive item to actually deliver. So and the last comment I'd make is there is still a corridor, a train corridor designation that does still lead into Cambridge, and that has been protected. And just comments on where we see that as part of any future, 2050 or beyond, as part of a strategy.
The work we did back in 2021 did look at rapid transit links across the metro area, including Cambridge. Very aware of the former railway and what's still there. We did do a piece of work. Again, it was pretty broad, but the costs related to rail were just astonishing. And we used unit prices from the Auckland transport, the metro rollout up there. So the prices were really current. And when you weighed it up with the potential patronage versus the costs involved, rapid transit at Cambridge, yes. Bus more than rail, probably. It's more nimble, it's more agile, but costs are just. So if someone one day wants to come in and do rail south, then fine. I think we would be challenged to justify it from a funding sense if you compared rail to bus. But if the conversation widened, then yeah.
Thanks for those comments. And I'd just like to support Eugene's comment too about Te Hui. That's we're broken the back of this, and to do something new is always challenging, and I think supporting the longevity of this going forward with a region that's the fastest growing area in the whole country would be nonsensical to sort of can.
Thank you, Chair Warren, and then Nanaya.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Thanks, Eugene, for raising this. It's way more critical than you believe, because coming to my council meeting next Thursday is the potential to either support or turn down a letter asking for an extension, a 1-year extension, and potentially keeping the FAR at 60% rather than dropping to 51 longer term. So my real concern is around the fact that we have had no input from your councils. My staff, I've been told that they have, but I don't believe councillors are across it. So, you know, as part of today, we need to have those discussions so my councillors can understand where your councils are sitting in this, because potentially we will be making a decision either way on that extension, and it could go against accepting that extension, which will then look to shorten the potential life of Te Huia really, really quickly. So it is critical, and we're talking 4 or 5 days critical.
Thank you. Now, Nanaia and then Mayor Axel.
Yeah, tēnā koe through the chair. Look, I'm not too sure if he's still here, but I just want to know if, in terms of mana whenua and in terms of iwi, the consultation that we need, because given that Waikato Tainui has a stratum easement that goes from the railway bridge all the way up to the railway station. I just want to know what sort of consultation do we get in terms of the new changes and the development that's going to take place in the future. I'm not too sure which one is going to answer that. The person that spoke to it has gone, I think. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Kia ora, Nanai.
Kia ora.
Are you referring to the city centre of Hamilton?
Yes.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Given that the stratum easement goes all the way up to the railway station.
So the business case that I referred to is looking at all of the future service options and just starting to think about what is the long list, what is the short list. So that's the stage that we're at. I would hope that you are represented on that project group,
Okay.
but I will check and make sure that we have
Thank you for that.
representation.
Kia ora.
Mayor Axel and then Jeff.
Yep, just wanted to say in response to your question there, what Eugene said. And so he speaks for the council, not just a person.
Jeff.
Thank you. Look, now that it's come up, we haven't discussed it recently as a council, but Hamilton City Council is in favour of the continuation of Te Huia. And I would acknowledge what Eugene said. It has come a long way. And the view of our council would be that it would be a hell of a shame after the journey it's been on for that to come to an end. So we'll be certainly happy to make submissions to the Regional Council along those lines.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments in terms of this morning's workshop where you haven't had an opportunity to ask yet? Don't appear to be anything. Robert, anything that you'd like to add?
No.
Okay. So, no, it's fine. So that completes the workshop. I have to say we're probably a wee bit ambitious on that. I'm just wondering, Vanessa, where are you? I'm just wondering whether we start with you, because we've got another 5 minutes, and then at 11:30, I know it's moving between things, I'll open the formal meeting and adjourn, finish off hearing from you, and then we need a cup of tea, and then we'll come back to the formal meeting. I think that'll be the best way of getting through everything. And looking at the agenda, I'm reasonably confident that we will still end. I think the allocation was to 1:30 in terms of the formal agenda. So, welcome back, Vanessa.
Thank you, Bill. I am just trying to join the meeting. I'm having a trouble with some of the slides. So we'll start. So what I'm principally going to be covering is not all the aspects of government reform that have been announced in the last few weeks. So we will be here all day. Some of you have heard my colleague Paul Barker and I present at Zone 2. I can certainly make that available, but I guess this discussion is centred around the simplifying local government announcements that were made on the 25th of November. And to bring you up to speed on all of that, to give you an idea of the timeframes. I've certainly spoken with some of you in depth about that. And I will be with you in just one moment. I'm terribly sorry about the delay.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. So okay. Thank you for your patience. On the 25th of November, the government announced simplifying.
No, bring it closer. Thanks, Vanessa.
Thank you. So on the 25th of November, government announced the simplifying local government changes. This slide is what has already been much spoken about the case for change and the reasons for this particular segment of the change. So just sets out a little bit things that you no doubt already know about the genesis of regional councils being established in 1989, some reports since then from Infrastructure New Zealand, Productivity Commission and others, and including the Future for Local Government review undertaken in the last term of government, and which have been summarised here as governance and structural issues as a key reason for perceived local government underperformance. This slide also notes that there have been barriers to reorganisation and that there have been 6 proposals for change developed between 2010 and 2019, none of which were implemented. And I'm just moving to the next slide. So you'll see in the paperwork that was released that there are 2 steps towards the changes towards this end of simplifying local government. Step 1 is very much about, it's called here, unifying regional governance. And there are some options in the papers around what that interim board called here a Combined Territories Board, or another acronym CTB. One of the options proposed, and certainly the preferred option of the government, is a situation where you have city and district mayors making up their Combined Territories Board, and without the regional councillors on that board. You'll note there that it says under that model, under all of the models, the options for consideration are that the regional council organisation itself is otherwise unchanged. So it's the governance of the regional council that is what we're talking about here in this step 1. It's really worth noting that there are alternative models noted in the paper for consideration. One of which is for the mayors to be joined on the CTB by a Crown Commissioner, with some options there about whether that Crown Commissioner is voting or non, or the veto right. And another option is for regional councillors to be replaced by Crown Commissioners without any elected representation. Again, I'll just emphasise that this is step 1 in the wider program here. Part of the remit of such a combined territories board is to consider within 2 years of establishment something called a regional reorganisation plan, again RRP, and that is about looking in the region on how to deliver local infrastructure, public services and regulatory functions more efficiently and cost effectively. And the slide sets out some of the things that the RLPs will consider, such as amalgamations, shared services agreements, jointly owned council companies and other models. And unitary authorities could form part of the outcomes. Point there about current unitary authorities, they can opt into that RRP process, with the exception of Auckland, who have been ring-fenced as they have their own legislation. One timeframe thing to note there is that those RRPs must be delivered within 2 years. Now, that is within 2 years of enactment of the legislation. I will cover at the end the timeframe, but broadly speaking, it's anticipated that the legislation won't be in place until around the middle of 2027. So there's that timeframe. There will be statutory criteria that to be developed, and that will also be consulted on. And a key criteria for inclusion there will be affordability. Minister for Local Government will be the decision maker on those plans, with some advice from the Local Government Commission and consultation with other ministers. Oh, my apologies. To cover there, also there's a note there about underway shortly is a rapid review of regional council roles and functions, and looking at statutory and non-statutory functions that the regional councils currently undertake, and to see whether they will be kept at the local level or centralised into central government. Wait for the screen to catch up. Okay. So just some key points to note. I know that there's a lot out there in the media and giving you a lot of information. We will be circulating these slides. That's the point to note. So the engagement document that has been posted online and is available on the DIA website seeks public feedback on the proposals. And I spoke about in one of the earlier slides about there are the options for the composition of those combined territories boards. There are 5 in total, with some slight nuances that I pointed out around commissioners, around veto rights, that type of thing. And although Cabinet has expressed a clear preference for the first option comprising theirs. Second point there is that all existing treaty settlement arrangements for regional councils remain unchanged, including Māori participation on council committees and JMAs as provided for in treaty settlements. In March 2026, after the consultation period ends, Cabinet will be making policy decisions on the content and the process for those regional reorganisation plans. That includes criteria, and that will inform the draft legislation. Fourth point there about resourcing, the Combined Territories Board will use regional council funding to put together their plans, and there's currently no separate government funding accompanying these proposals. I guess the final point is that the idea is that councils are the ones to determine the arrangements that best meet the needs of their regions, and there is no template or predetermined outcome here, but there will be criteria to inform those, and we're seeking feedback on this. The final slide I have here is about the timelines. I've run you through a lot of the content. So we've had the proposal document. We're in the consultation phase now, and we fully acknowledge that we're doing this alongside other reform over the Christmas period. So until 20th of February 2026, there's the engagement on the proposal document alongside the rapid review of regional council roles and functions. In March 2026, those policy decisions will be made, particularly around the regional reorganisation plan and the criteria, and ministers will report back to Cabinet with the proposal in order to do that, and a preliminary view on any transfer or cessation of regional council functions. Mid-2026, legislation is introduced and referred to Select Committee, and the idea is that mid-2027, legislation is enacted. The final point in italics on this slide is just to give you an indication of where some matters are yet to be determined and where feedback is sought, particularly around for how long regional councils will continue to operate. And, certainly been in discussion with Waikato Regional Council about that. And so feedback is sought on that, and feedback will be, decisions will be made following consultation. I guess the key point to note there is that ministers have indicated that they see the local government elections in 2025 are likely to be the last that include regional councillors. So I will stop there. I do have a slide around, this is what you've seen before, on RM timeframes. That one is particularly, yes, this one here. So with the announcements made this week, which I won't go into in detail, you'll see that the announcement around the consultation period and when that begins hasn't been made because a decision around Select Committee referral hasn't been made yet. But this slide is intended to give you may have seen this elsewhere, gives an indication of once the legislation is enacted, what there are certain trigger points that follow, and it's to give you that idea, particularly around things like spatial plans over the next few years, and particularly when you're thinking about the long-term plans, 2027.
Okay, no, thanks, Vanessa. Did you say that the slides can be circulated to members?
Yes.
Okay, no, thank you. Well, that completes the presentations to the workshop. In terms of if members have any questions of Vanessa, she'll be here for morning tea and also here for the formal meeting. So on her behalf, I'm sure she's happy to answer as far as she can, bearing her role, any queries that members may have. So what I'd like to do, I will now close the workshop. So thank you. And there has been a lot of information provided, some of which we will come back to, obviously, in the formal meeting. And I will formally convene the Future Proof Implementation